Alright, so we're going to start off by discussing how recent historical events have affected research in organizational psychology. So recent historical events such as the Hawthorne studies, World War II, Vietnam War, 9/11, globalization, development of communication technology, all of these things have affected the course of research in the industrial organizational field. Specifically, they've led to research being more focused on topics such as social factors and their impact on behavior in the workplace, quality of work-life conflict, impact of diversity and cultural differences in the workplace, as well as retirement and emergency preparedness. So two specific examples include the Vietnam War and 9/11. So the Vietnam War took place between the 1960s and 1970s. And a major issue that stemmed from this was the lack of trust in the government, because they believed that there was lies or that they were covering up stuff to do with the war. So this led to many people questioning societal norms and institutions like the government or legal system or educational systems. And it really led to decreased credibility of authority figures. So, and this affected the workplace because your authority figures are your managers, your supervisors, and with their lack of credibility, people stopped blindly following them and stopped really listening to authority figures. And this caused issues in the workplace. So because of this and these cultural changes, research had to find a way to motivate employees outside of financial benefits and threats of consequences from authority, because they were no longer really credible. So research had to shift and kind of find a way to motivate individuals to do their job outside of authoritative influences. And then 9/11, this tragedy led to research needing to look into emergency preparedness. So before this, emergency preparedness wouldn't have been seen as much as a necessity as it was prior, or as it was after. So this led to research regarding this, in which IO psychologists need to figure out a way to implement emergency plans, create ones that work for certain organizations, and really make sure that they are readily available if we do have another emergency in the workplace. And then the second question is describe the socialization process for graduate students in my program. My program is the master's program in industrial organizational psychology at Liberty University. And so I'm going to discuss the socialization process in different phases. So the first phase would be anticipatory socialization, and this occurs before individuals join the graduate program. So during this phase, students or individuals like myself, we would research Liberty. We would want to see maybe their mission statement, history about Liberty, their policies, the academic success of prior students, the outcomes of individuals who have gotten the degree that we're looking into. And all of these things will help us assess whether we will be a good fit or not for Liberty, and then will affect whether we choose to apply or not. The second process, or the second phase of this process, would be the encounter phase. During this phase, graduate students like myself have already been accepted and have now begun the program. This is when we are beginning to learn the demands of our role as a student in the program. We're beginning to interact with our courses, and we're trying to understand what is required of us to be successful. Things like the syllabus, and our professors are able to provide role clarification and clarification of our workload. And then the third phase would be the change and acquisition phase. This phase, students like myself have become fairly comfortable with their role as a student, and we know what is now expected of us in terms of the quality of work we need to turn in, how the assignments need to be done, things like that. We've also been able to achieve personal a balance between our personal lives and our school life. And this is something that occurs once the socialization is really coming to an end. And then finally, the socialization process for graduates in my program would really end with an assessment of both effective outcomes and behavioral outcomes. Within my program, effective outcomes would include things like looking at how much effort is put into schoolwork, is students' schoolwork turned in on time, are we participating, do we seem motivated to succeed? And then finally, the behavioral outcomes will look at things such as how students perform in their courses and what their grades are, to really see if their outcomes are reflected by the socialization. You want these behavioral and these effective outcomes to be positive so that you know the socialization process really was effective. So usually grades or low effective outcomes can show that maybe socialization didn't occur correctly. And then if I was to consider, is the socialization of my program successful in socializing newcomers, I would say that's based on the grades earned and the success of the students, so it would be pretty individualized if you're looking at it from a student-to-student perspective. If we're just considering overall, is the socialization within this program effective, I would say yes, because when we're looking at the outcomes of Liberty University students, you can see that the grades and the job outcomes and the academic achievements are high, which is a good indicator that socialization occurred and that the behavioral and effective outcomes are positive as well. And then if I was looking at the student's sense of embeddedness in the program, so for my program specifically, because it is online, I would say student embeddedness is a little bit lower because we do not have the opportunity to communicate face-to-face with students and faculty. However, we still have some aspects of communication when we're looking at discussion boards or emails or different assignments that require us to discuss with each other. This kind of gives a feeling of embeddedness, but I would say it would be less than face-to-face academic program. Okay, and then the third question is, how can an organization reduce or prevent family conflict? So a couple different ways we can do this would be creating work-family policies, and these should focus on helping the employee successfully fit into both their roles as a worker and as a non-worker. And these non-worker roles can include things like being a caretaker, being a student, being a parent, all sorts of different things like that. It should also really look at self-care, health, and other things like that. And then under the umbrella of work-family policies are family-friendly benefits. And these things can also help reduce or prevent work-family conflict for your employees. And these benefits include things like maybe on-site daycare facilities, flex time, maybe discounts for counseling, job sharing, and then other things that would benefit them in their non-work roles. So maybe if they're a parent, it will be benefits for their children. If they're a caretaker, benefits for elderly, and if they're a student, benefits for education. And another huge thing is we want to ensure that the organizational culture as well as the supervisors are supportive of these benefits and policies, because if they are not, this can lead to employees being hesitant to utilize them because they'd be worried about going against the norm at the job, or worried that there may be some consequence of using them, as they don't see really any support from supervisors regarding using them. Nothing that tells them like, hey, this is okay, these are here for a reason, please feel welcome to use them. And then two smaller things is the organization can provide employees with coping skills to help them with the effects of work-family conflict and maybe help them balance it. And then they can provide various ways for employees to seek assistance, maybe on-site counseling, or some references to some places outside of work that can be of assistance for work-family conflict. And then question 4. So I'm going to discuss performance assessment, so developing a performance assessment program for employee development. If I was doing that, what techniques could I use to adequately evaluate employee performance as comprehensively as possible? So I would make sure that I focused on both in-role and extra-role behaviors to make sure I get a comprehensive understanding of the individual's job performance, because I don't just want to look at technical productivity outcomes. And to better assess in-role behaviors, I would look at their task proficiency, which are really the technical things. I want to see their outcomes. I want to know what their sales are, what their commissions are, things like that, just to make sure that they're adequately performing in the role that they are in. Next, to look at to assess extra role behaviors, I'm going to be looking at interpersonal transactions or interactions on the job, and I would look at those at how it relates to tasks, so maybe team building or peer facilitation or leading, things like that. And then I would also look at interpersonal transactions outside of tasks, so seeing if they are communicating effectively with coworkers, if they're able to really foster and build relationships with them so that it is a positive environment that influences good job performance. And then also under the extra role umbrella, I would consider their behaviors outside of work, specifically ones that may affect their job performance at work. So maybe things like they're working another job, or they're in school, or they are partaking in illegal drug use or substance abuse, things like that that would overflow into the job and most likely negatively affect their job performance or lead to counterproductive behaviors in the workplace. And then lastly, I would look at their destructive or hazardous behaviors within the workplace. So this would include things like purposeful sabotage or maybe accidents on the work site, safety violations. These are things that can really have negative effects on their performance, as well as negatively affect and endanger other employees. So this would help me get a better understanding of their discipline within their role, as well as the amount of effort they're putting in, because the lack of effort or lack of discipline can lead to destructive and hazardous behaviors. And I will end this by assessing the in-role and out-role dimensions using a behaviorally anchored rating scale to avoid bias and rater errors and ensure that the job performance is reflected as accurately as possible, which is a struggle with some other assessment measures. And then question 5 is, what are some possible what are some common organizational constraints? How could they lead to counterproductive behaviors? So some possible constraints can include unnecessary rules and regulations, favoritism, lack of knowledge or training, lack of workplace support, or poor equipment. These can lead to counterproductive behaviors, as these constraints cause feelings of frustration in the employees. However, those with an internal locus of control believe that they have a control over their behaviors and that they are responsible for their own success. Those individuals tend to take these feelings of frustration and act in a constructive way. However, the individuals with external locus control, who believe that external forces determine their success or outcomes, tend to take these frustrations caused by workplace constraints and then act in a destructive way, which leads to counterproductive behaviors within the workplace. So really it depends on their control, so whether they believe it is an internal or external forces, that really affects whether it's going to be destructive behaviors or productive behaviors. And more specifically, those with an external locus of control do not believe that these frustrating constraints can be changed, and that really leads them to take on destructive behaviors. Thank you.